A warm welcome to everybody for this GLF Green Honor Book Award ceremony. Invite to Ajay and Roselin. We have, just to take you through the process of the award. Ganesh, can you put those 10? These are the jury members who so these are the 10 books which were longlisted. You'd get a glimpse of all the books that were longlisted for the award. Then we had a short list of 5 books. Can you show the 5 books? Yes. These were the 5 books. So out of these 5 books, the jury members have picked up 3. So unlike the usual book award ceremonies, which pick up just one book, so we, to promote green literature in a much more inclusive way, we have come up with this concept of honor books. So we have picked 3 books, and all 3 have equal standing here, and all 3 receive the same certificate and the award, cash prize, and everything else. So can I now invite Ajay? Can I invite Ajay on the stage? Ajay, welcome.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Benedict, for this honor and this opportunity of reading these absolutely fascinating and wonderful books. I learnt a lot, and I haven't read so much in the last 1 year. So, what the challenge of reading all the books in 15 days, I'm sure I'm going to go through them again in more and again. But it's been wonderful. So, you wanted to speak to me to speak about all the books briefly?
So yeah, just before that, I'd like to introduce you to the audience who are still there. So Ajay is the founder of Environics, a Delhi-based company, and a very innovative company, I must say. So he has a revolutionary product which hasn't marketed enough, I think, which is Enviro Chip. So it basically eliminates radiation around you and improves your health and improves productivity in organizations or in offices, even at home. So so I'd like to welcome Ajay to
Thank you.
this is called the musings of a jury member. So just tell us about the books you juried and the impressions you got. So you have 7 minutes.
Okay. So there's a lot to say about each book. So I just say
Um,
that.
just a
Uh,
second, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your voice is really soft. So if you could just
okay.
speak a little loudly, that would help.
Is it better now?
Um, Slightly better, but yeah, try the best
Put
possible.
it on maximum volume here.
Welcome, Roselin. I'll introduce you a little later.
So I think India in a Warming World by Navroz, he has talked about the challenges, but he said on an optimistic note what India is doing right, the contributions by CSC, by Terry, by the NAPCC, and the International Solar Alliance, which India has forged ahead. India is the leader. Also, the positive initiatives taken with LED, LPG, the quick transition from Euro 4 to Euro 6, and the main thing that he brings out through the various articles which he has compiled or which he has chosen is that this has become politically important now to gain credibility and importance to be on the right side of climate change alleviation. And also now businesses, earlier businesses, there were the naysayers, and now business is perceiving it as good business. That if we are doing things for the environment, if we are environmentally responsible, if we are following the ESG guidelines, then our branding and our shareholder value improves. So whatever is the motivation, but it's a good thing. You also, important point is that a lot of worldwide biodiversity and flora and fauna exists in India, and especially in two states like Kerala and Assam, which account for almost 6% of the worldwide flora and fauna. So it's a good compilation, but as a read, there's a lot of information, but sometimes the interest of the reader is cannot be sustained because of an overload of information. He's talked about the various climate change conferences and how India has become proactive, how PM Modi has worked on that. Then the Oxygen Manifesto by Mr. Atulya Mishra. He, of course, has a great understanding of how bureaucracy works, how politics works, and also how and all the ecological and environmental issues. And he uses a fictional narrative to great effect to bring forth so the book is very, very readable, and it's very great storytelling, and it talks about important things like how the media treats news just to increase their TRPs, and then he talks about the judiciary in a good light. He talks that conflict is caused by the concentration of wealth, and with larger enterprises and with standardization that is occurring. He talks about how political news is used for the vote banks, and then after that people's real issues are forgotten. Of course, he's talking about pavements, biodiversity. He talks a lot about how garbage and plastic and noise, which not many people talk about in the sustainability and the environmental issues, is causing problem. And he's proposing that government should be a facilitator of law and order, and also facilitating people's initiatives. And he makes the point that people's group can take care of their own interests if they are allowed to, without a lot of other pressure groups. Then there's Resource Wars Mapping Global Greed by Mr. Bane Singh. He's talking about, it's a fascinating documentation. All the kinds of countries, all the parts of the world, all the things that have happened, whether it is to do with nuclear, whether it is to do with sand mining, whether it is to do with coal and water wars, it's to do with fracking. Fracking is a very important, this shale gas thing, how it is causing earthquakes, and how climate change is causing floods, fires, other seasonal problems. That is very fascinating. He's also made the case of India trying to use thorium more, because we have it abundantly available for nuclear energy instead of the uranium which we are still importing. For me, apart from these books, I was absolutely fascinated by 9 rupees an hour by Miss Aparna Karthikeyan. The way, because it has so much of a human story, she's making the case that 2%, only 2% of the India's GDP is actually focused on rural issues, which of course rural India is 70% of the population. And the way agriculture is being made to die, the money is not available, the feed costs have gone up by 200 to 250 times, whereas the earnings have only gone up by 25-30 times. It's been relegated to caste. So a lot of occupations which had required skill development over generations are regarded as lowly caste, and people are humiliated, people who do that. She talks about this toddy, which is quite cheap and good for, also healthy and good for the poor people, where the IMFL has used adulteration as a ruse to see that it is banned. And the IMFL also, she's talking about lobbies, she's talking about how the local cows are being replaced by the Jersey cows, and how the flora and fauna, the biodiversity, of course all the issues. But she talks about how the traditional artisans, the crafts, is our real treasure, and that is all being killed because of when agriculture stops, and there's a chance cattle is reduced by almost 19%. And when you have all this, then all these occupations like carpentry, like our wood making, the sickle making, the jallikattu, how with this cow slaughter and all that ban has resulted in a whole lot of ecological issues and loss of employment. So I found her to be, and though she's talking about most of the things that is happening in Tamil Nadu, she talks about the Kanchi Varam saris and the temples and so many things, and the palm trees, how it can be mechanized, and how standardization and mechanization is causing a problem with everything else. So I think I found her book, and though it is only about Tamil Nadu, but the same things can apply anywhere else. So she's talking about food, whether we moved away from millets and lentils to paddy and rice because the British didn't understand it, and these are now proving to be much healthier grains which the world they sell so expensive, and here we are not even cultivating them. So the government policy, the bank loans, the farmer suicides, how banks are not helping, how they are in the clutches of money lenders, these are serious issues which I think this book is very important book brings to the fore. And I'd finally like to speak about Mr. Sinha's book about the fossil fuels. And of course, this is like, it's like a Bible because it starts from the earlier 17th, 18th centuries, the evolution of how we used animals for wars, for transportation, how that moved to the steam engines, to the IC engines, to coal, and then of course to oil. So how railways were powered by coal, and then the automobile revolution was, and how there was an explosion after the Second World War, that just the number of cars increasing exponentially. And then of course moving on to our power, and and he makes the point that all the producers knew that this is going to cause a lot of carbon, global warming, and cause environmental problems, but because of the economic greed and how wars are linked to, then the civilian population takes over whatever is done in the wars and just multiplies it. And of course, he's very appreciative of the government policies, what India has done for solar alliances, except for the fact that we don't have any manufacturing capacity for PVs, which is all concentrated in China. And it's really fascinating the way he straddled the whole universe, and with his understanding, running a successful company, understanding of economics, how he suggested very cogent policies which the government can adopt to see that this thing can, the way forward can be good for us. He says India must do much more manufacturing. He talks about the problem of funding and the rooftop, more encouragement to rooftop things, batteries. So I found it to be very fascinating. He's welcoming the SDGs as a very positive initiative, and how Germany has made a coherent policy with their energy V-Day thing, how energy is going to happen and how they've done systematically, how pollution is affecting us, and how VC funding has improved in India by almost 4 times in the last 6 years, and what technologies, digital technologies can do with efficient mapping of where what power is used, and storage being more storage. He's talked about the sand mafia, of course. He's talked about fracking, how it can cause earthquakes. So all those things. But one of the things which I wish he had talked about was that what do we do with all the e-waste? And this is going to be a serious problem. And this is my own take after I finish with the books, that there is, even in a place near Delhi called Loni, there is an e-waste coming from all over the world, and it is burnt. And nobody is talking about how much that is contributing to pollution. And this is going to be more and more. Also, you have a kind of a greenhouse effect. When you have solar technology, it's going to be embedded in bricks, in roofs. And if you are going to be in that, it's like sleeping with a generator or a transformer next to you. So I think, and one of the things which most of the authors did not speak about was how we could use geothermal energy, though it's at a nascent stage, but because it's natural. And in our area of work, I would like to stress on two things. One is that we are talking about groundwater depletion. We are not recharging it enough, which Aparna has spoken about. But we are not talking about how to take out water. So if we take out, even in UK and many countries, they take out water from the natural water streams, underground water streams. So these are more perennial sources of water. And through water divining, they're doing that. And today, with sophisticated instrumentation, it is possible to access these water streams and take water from there rather than depleting groundwater. So that's one point I wanted to make. Second is we deal with correction of geopathic stresses. These are certain negative energies which come from underground water streams, cavities, and certain geopathic lines which are called Hartmann lines. So they inhabit about 20% of the Earth's surface. And this is a perpetual source of energy. So if we can do research on that and draw energy from that and store it, it can be 24/7. Unlike solar energy where the sun shines, then you can get it, otherwise you have to store it. This is there all the time. So there are many new areas of research which we must start now, because each of these things, whether it is solar, whether it is wind, they will have reach a certain saturation, and there will be a backlash with the lithium batteries and the other things where they will also cause certain environmental problems. So this is what, and I want to congratulate all the authors. It's been a great labor of love, I think, the way they've written the books, and it's been a great education for me to read these books. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ajay. I think that was, even I didn't expect that you would go into such detail on each of the books. I think the audience and I loved a lot, rather learned a lot from your uh, take on each of the books. So the way we lined up the rest of the session today is that Ajay will announce the three winners of the GLF Great Book Award. And after that, Roselin Minj will chat with two of the winners. I think Suman Sinha couldn't make it. So we have, yeah, so before we come there, Ajay, you need to announce, and can we have the banner of the three winners, Ganesh? Okay, so congratulations to Mr. Atulya Mishra for winning this. So you have to, Ajay, you have to announce that.
Yes, so congratulations, Atulya ji. I think it's a very well written book, and it deserves to be read by a lot of people. And I'm certainly going to recommend it to a lot of my people to read it. And I look forward to seeing you. So, heartiest congratulations for your winning this award. Much deserved. I would also like to announce for all the winners and all the other authors a hamper of our products, which are these radiation protection without sacrificing technology, which will be sent to each one of you once we have your details.
Can I have the next winner, banner?
So Aparna ji, congratulations. I'm absolutely awed by your book, and this is really well deserved. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading your book much more than anything else in the recent past. Congratulations. And Sumanji, of course, it's a very comprehensive book. So congratulations very much. I know your passion and your commitment to this renewable sector, and I've had the pleasure of interacting with you. And it's a fantastic book, and you have received accolades from all over the world. So this panel is also honoring itself by honoring you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Can we, Aparna? Ganesh, can you let them in? Yeah, Hello, Aparna. Good to see you.
I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. Yes. Hello, Mishra. How are you? Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Good evening to you all.
Yeah, good evening. I'd like to introduce Roselin a bit, and then she's going to chat with you about your books. So Roselin works with WRI, World Research Institute, as head of partnership. She's international climate champion and a global change maker, been announced as a global change maker by the British Council. Her expertise lies at the intersection of sustainability, social impact, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Welcome, Roselin. Thanks for being here, and thanks for putting in the hard work of being in the jury as well. So over to you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Benedict. And first of all, good evening, everyone. And it is my absolute pleasure to be here. And I think it's an honor and privilege for me to be on the jury. And of course, it was wonderful, like Mr. Poddar said, it was wonderful to actually read through so many great books, and especially the three that are the winners and are on the honor list today. I think they absolutely deserve it. It was a wonderful learning experience for me as well, going through a lot of that. And I've been a big reader since childhood, and this is really one of those opportunities that I would really cherish. I want to just, before going into the chat part of it, I would just want to maybe quickly share my 2 cents and my own reactions to the books as well. Mr. Sumansana couldn't join us, but like Mr. Poddar said, I think it was a wonderful practitioner's view of the entire history and really the ecosystem of energy. And he talked wonderfully about the energy transition that we are in now. And especially, I think the focus of that simple storytelling, that there was so much of data, but also there was a storytelling and a narrative with it. So it was never a really heavy read. And I would end up, I think, suggesting that book, Fossil Free, as a book to anyone who's really trying to understand the energy ecosystem, really the journey of how we started from fossil fuels and now the impact of energy, how businesses are really looking at energy differently. I think that was a great read by itself. Moving to, I think, Oxygen Manifesto by Atulya Mishra ji. It was again a wonderful read, and what I really liked best was that I think Atulya ji took his own experiences of his own journey, the IAS journey, and interspersed that in this fictional narrative. I think the story of how Ravi and Thata met, and really the contrast between their personalities, that Thata being this really grassroots community worker who doesn't care about any accolades that he was getting, and Ravi who really changed midway. It was like his personality underwent a complete change. He started being a bureaucrat, and then he ended up being almost shunned many a times by the media because of the stance that he would take on development. I think that journey of his was really interesting to see the balance in their personalities. That was wonderful. And then 9 rupees an hour by Aparna. I absolutely loved it. I think the way I would describe it is that it was just heartbreakingly beautiful for me. The reason is that as a part of our work at WRI, and I've been working in the space for about 15 years as well, we talk a lot about the business impacts and the environmental impacts, but very, very few times we really talk about the social impact, the economic impact, and taking that lens of vulnerable communities the way you did, even though it was concentrated in Tamil Nadu, but talking about how 10 very different livelihoods were impacted. They are continuing to be impacted by the way we operate because of climate change, because of environmental catastrophes. I think that was just brilliant to read. And I wrote down one sentence that really spoke to me, that when livelihoods are demolished, it is not just the economy that disintegrates, culture does too. I think that was one of my favorite lines from the book. So really, congratulations to all 3 winners, and Aparna and Atulya ji, thank you so much for being able to join us. So what we are going to do over the next 25 minutes is we'll talk a little bit about the book, of course, but I think we'll also try focusing a little on your own journey as authors. I'm sure all the participants here would love to hear how these books came about, how the ideas came about. So we'll focus a little bit on that as well. So Atulya ji, I would maybe start with you. I think if you can maybe just begin with telling us how this all came about, given that you are a bureaucrat yourself, you've been in the government system for so long. how did the idea of becoming an author come about, and what was the journey and what was the inspiration really behind this book?
Actually, I never started as a bureaucrat. I started as an activist. So when I was in college, there was an organization called Kalpavriksha, which was organizing a Narmada walk. Somehow I was roped in, and I also participated in that Narmada walk. And many of my colleagues who participated in that walk are today's big names in environmental journey and climate change and global warming, and many other aspects of the social aspects of the Indian as well as international forums. Then when I got into the IAS, we were talking about constitutional rights, constitutional duties. We were talking about the principles on which the constitution was based. I was very surprised that we don't have an environmental right. We have environmental duties. We have directive principles which aim towards betterment of environment. But none of those 6 rights give us any right over the air we breathe, the water we drink, the space which we require. And there was no environmental law as such when we started our service. The only thing which was applicable or which was available to us was 133 CRPC, which talks about public nuisance. When we became sub-collectors, somebody was pushing the factory water into Kaveri. The only thing available to us was 133 CRPC. If a complaint is made, we will call him, why you are causing a public nuisance, we will give a notice. And that's how the journey started. Then, of course, the Pollution Act came, the pollution laws came, environmental laws came. You must be all remembering a book in which the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi ji, with the Prime Minister of Norway, they were sharing a forum. And that is how the environmental movement started in the world and then in our country. Then it so happened that I did a course in environmental and sustainable development in Delhi. It was a part of the courses which are offered to IAS officers. At that time, we were sent to Yale University, and the Yale University taught us about environmental index they were making, something like the poverty index. So a lot of education was a part of all this. Then I thought I'll do a PhD. So I was the transport secretary at that time, and people were talking about green transport. So I started my PhD with green transport. But as the life of a bureaucrat, we keep shifting, From transport department, I went to the port. So then my PhD also shifted from the bus and road transport to sea transport. And there was a talk about green shipping at that time. I did my PhD in the carbon footprints of a port, which was Chennai port. And there I again learned a lot of things. But when I wanted to write, my publisher said, I want you to write an environment, knowing that I have done enough of education in environmental sciences. The general idea was that you are an IAS officer, you're a bureaucrat, you should write something which is a non-fiction. So I was not very excited about it, because I knew there's a lot of academicians, a lot of experts who have a niche area in that. And I have an upbringing in which we see society, we see environment, we see economics. I was industry secretary, where we would be promoting industries at the cost of environment, and then I'll become an environment secretary. Then I'll be talking about environment at the cost of everything else. So we belong to syndicates, and we keep shifting our syndicates. Unlike industrialists who will probably remain in the business, we tend to change. And then I became revenue secretary, and then I became disaster management secretary. So I was seeing the world in different kaleidoscopes, in different silos, and each talking about the benefit of the particular sector he was representing. So there was, of course, a debate on economics, how industrialization helps, how environment cannot come before industrialization happens, how economy and ecology cannot be put together. And then we started feeling that it is actually all one. You cannot have economics without ecology. You cannot have development unless there's a social development, there's an environmental development. If we are not able to provide, we have seen this evolution. Today, we are looking towards a pedestrian pathway. Not many people can walk in a city. Not many people can cycle in a city. So on the name of development, on the name of metros, on the name of putting roads, on the name of putting highways, on the name of putting skyscrapers, we have taken away from some basic things which also are important in giving quality of life. There are no play fields, there are no parks. And actually, it is impossible to walk in any of the major cities today, which used to be a matter of pleasure. We all walked the street. We all played. They were like, as children, we used to play cricket. Today, the children watch cricket. So that is the transition which we have seen in the society. So I thought fiction is a good medium. And because I was in the civil services, the first hero of my first book turned out to be a bureaucrat. And I took my journey and the journey of the fictional character together. And I thought that I will present environmental issues as human issues rather than statistical issues or mathematical issues or economic issues. And I was able to weave a story which I thought I will put it together. My publisher also was kind enough to publish it. It did very well. And today I'm very happy that the book has been recognized and it has been awarded. And then I wrote another book, which was again on environment, on waste management. It has just been printed it is available now all over. And it's called Vultures of Paradise, which is again on waste management, again a fiction.
Right.
So
Thank you so much. I think, Atulyaji, it was wonderful hearing how the story really came about, how the big book came about. And actually, when I was reading it, I was wondering that how did it come about as a fiction book rather than non-fiction, because that is generally the route that people take. So I'm glad you covered that. It was actually interesting to hear how that came about. And Aparna, with that, I'll move to you maybe. The stories, like we said, each of the 10 stories were absolutely fascinating, right? From the woman who was the only bull rearer to really the people who climb the trees. There were so many different stories and angles that you covered. How did this book come about? What was the trigger? How did you really even think about traveling through Tamil Nadu, traveling through the rural areas? And did the book come first? The idea of the book come first, or did you start traveling and the idea of the book germinated from that? Would love to hear about it. Aparna, you're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the kind words about the book. It's always such a pleasure to hear that the book works for people. I'm really delighted that it's here with these wonderful other books, as part of these 3 in the honor list. So how my writing journey started is basically I sent a fan mail to my teacher, P. Sainath. I used to be a freelance writer at that point in 2013, it was in July 2013, he had written an article in the Hindu newspaper. I read it, I loved it, and I sent him a fan mail. So normally when people get a fan mail, a writer gets a fan mail, they send you back like a 2-line, acknowledging that, they've received it. Surprisingly, Sainath said he had read my articles, he had seen my byline, he liked the work that I was doing, which was basically about everyday lives of people in the city of Chennai. So I was going after people who are very much there, but whom we don't know by name. The security people, the iron men, people who are doing vending small things in the street side. So I was going after people like that and writing about them, basically putting them in a newspaper, with their photo, with their names, with their occupation, with their life stories. He liked that. And he said, why don't you do this for the villages? Because my friends and I are going to start something called as the People's Archive of Rural India. Obviously it was fascinating, and it's not every day that others come and work with me. So of course I agreed, and that was the first time I stepped out of my comfort zone, which is Chennai city, into Tamil Nadu. I've only gone on holidays and trips until then. I was not familiar with the villages, although as a Tamilian I have always worn the culture as a badge of pride. It's only after I stepped out of my comfort zone that I realized that the people who are upholding this culture are actually the vulnerable, the marginalized, the people. They are the ones who are keeping alive this culture no matter what, so that people like me can benefit from it, whether it is a sari or whatever, all of the things that are there in the book. they're all kept alive by them. So the journey started with that. And basically I did a series on vanishing livelihoods, a series of 10 stories. And then I applied for a fellowship, which I did not get, but I wrote out a proposal. And that was sitting, in my computer for a very long time. And one day I was telling my friend, what do I do about this? And she said, why don't you send it to a publisher? And I'm like, don't be silly, who's going to take this? And I sent it to a publisher and they took it that very afternoon, so, the universe was kind and the book came about, and it took about a year and something to go back and research and dig deeper and, write the book, because the stories some of the stories were done previously, some were done for the book. And I was living in Bombay at that time. So it always meant that, I had this family and everything, and had to put everything on hold and then come here to Tamil Nadu. But, as a person of privilege, it's not like it was hardship or anything. It was just, time management. But it was an enormously interesting journey. And I think I learned so much, and people trusted me with these stories, which is the fundamental thing. Basically, people allowed me into their houses, into their lives. I asked so many intrusive questions, to women my age. And that all really put me, it made me realize how privileged I was, coming from a city, going to the village. And so, for example, like my daughter is in her 20s, so, and when she says, I want to do this, it's never a question of like, no, you can't do it because, we can't, children of privileged backgrounds, we are able to give them so much. The woman I'm speaking to, is sitting in a mud hut and she's doing this work. And then she's telling me that my daughter wants to be a doctor, but she cannot become one because we don't have the resources for it. She can't dream, right? She can't dream, her children can't dream. So when does all this improve, right? So you go and meet these people and then you realize that we're all benefited from something. And there are many more people who still need to benefit. Change the world in a day, but I can generate a conversation, which is what I hope to do with this book. And, the work that I plan to do in the future, the journalism, that I plan to do in the future, generate conversations around people who are invisibilized because we don't to tell their stories in the kind of detail that we can tell about a celebrity child's, they're going with their nanny here. This person is going there for their yoga class. Look, what they're wearing. That sort of, this actor is getting married. I mean, I'm sure there is a lot of interest. We seem to have, equal amount of interest for 70% of our fellow people, and, which is something that I'd like to do in a very small way. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna. That was lovely to hear how the genesis of this book came about, and absolutely brings forth the stories of the unfortunately invisible folks that we don't think about, even in conversations of climate change and impact. Generally, the vulnerable communities and the marginalized communities are often the last that we think about. We talk about business impact, the economic impact, impact of the social impact falls a little bit lower, on the priority lens. And it's great that through books like these, and both yours and Atulyaji's books, bringing forth that dimension that's really sort of much often. And Atulyaji, my next question to you is that a little bit on the process. I'm sure a lot of people looking at the session today, attending the session today, are aspiring authors themselves. And given that you have a prestigious role in the government, yet make time to write, I think is absolutely inspirational for a lot of people. So my next question was a little bit on the process. How do you make time for writing? What is really your process, and what was how much time did it take you to put the book together? If you can talk about that journey a little bit of how it came about.
I'm just switching over to my cell phone because this is causing a... I guess
in one of the devices, we can turn off the speaker, the other device, so that we don't get the feedback. Thank you.
I think it works now, is it?
Perfect. Roselin, ma'am, sorry, you're on mute.
Actually, this particular, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
So actually, this was a challenge, finding out time and then putting it all together, finding a publisher in the first book, and then converting actually a manuscript into a book, because I still write longhand. I don't write on a computer or with keypad. So it took a little more time in writing my first book. It took me almost around 6 to 8 months to do it. But I have a habit of going for long walks. So most of my stories will come into my mind when I'm walking. And then I have to just find out some place. In my service, what happens is that you have to participate in many unwarranted meetings where you are just a mute, you are just a part of the crowd. So there will be a meeting, economic development, but a person from disaster management will also be called in. And the portion he has to contribute to that meeting will be very, very limited. And I used to use my pen and paper and keep putting down my story. Then we also get to go for inspection. And when we go for inspections, we are away from the family, and there's a little available. Because once the inspection is done, then you are simply in a room. And again, you get a little chance. So it was done in verse. And but the story was always remaining in the mind. That is how I managed.
That's lovely to hear, and I think
then,
very inspirational as well.
Office. So they put it together. They helped me in typing the manuscript, then the search for a publisher. And even when I gave him my publisher my manuscript, the publisher said you should write nonfiction. So even with some 180 pages in his hand, he was still insisting that fiction is not something which will go with a bureaucrat. All those challenges were there, but it was a very, very interesting journey. And it was a very emotional journey as well.
Absolutely. And we are glad that you stuck with fiction, how you wanted it to originally to be, because that really lends a different to the book as well. And the way it reads, I think that seamlessness is because you took a fiction route. I think it's good that you stuck with it. Aparna, my next question to you is, you talked about a little bit of the journey already, so I'm not going to ask you that. I think ask you is that a question actually that came in the chat, that you've also written books for children. So one book that's mentioned is the No Nonsense Nandini book that you wrote, that was also on the children's book list, long list that was there. So how different is it to write for these very different audiences, children and adults, and you write for both? So how is that experience? How do you manage that? Is there a different mindset that you get into? Is there a different process you follow? So if you can cover about that a little bit.
Thank you. Basically, I write both fiction and non-fiction for children, and for adults, I've done only one book, which is 9 rupees an hour. So when I do this fiction and non-fiction, what I basically learned is, being a journalist and being on the field and, learning to research, learning to make notes. That's like great learning for whatever you want to write. I'm sure Mr. Atulya will also agree with that, right? I mean, like, one has to really observe a lot of things to kind of bring things to life, in the book. So even when it was about the dogs, I wrote a book about my two dogs, my two rescued dogs in Bombay on the beach. When I wrote that as well, it was about spending a lot of time with them and observing every little detail. So No Nonsense Nandini was about my friend who's a woman farmer. I met her on my 40th birthday walk, and her mother found me, by the roadside, and she said, come to my house. And I went to their house, and I discovered she and her mother had both lost their husbands within, a few weeks of each other. And they were both women farmers, and so when we say farmer, we always think of a man with a dhoti, and with a standing behind a bull, with a plow in their hand. That's the immediate image of a farmer that we have. If we think of a progressive farmer, we think of a man wearing a trouser and a shirt on a tractor. It's never women, unless we're thinking of transplanting. So for transplanting, we always have like a row of women, and then we say, they're singing, they're enjoying, they know to do this work. But it's never about the hardships of a women farmer. So when you want to write about something like that, you have to get close to the character. That is difficult because I'm a city creature. I've not done any hard labor in my life. So, for me to actually go there and learn, it meant that, the protagonist had to actually spend a lot of time educating me. So for that, I'm eternally grateful, that I got the opportunity to speak a lot. So for example, example, Chandra and I, we would talk in the evenings after she finishes all the housework. And I'm done with all my work, like we'll sit down and then we'll be like, okay, so Chandra, in your story, the character is going to do this. Is it okay? And then she'll start laughing and she says, what, Akka, what is this? You know, are you sure you want me to fall in love? And I'm like, yeah, come on, it's fiction. So why don't we do that? So, I mean, it really, you know, worked out like that. But basically, I think the principles of journalism, you know, observing, taking notes, trying to make it realistic. There's something that I read a long time back. The best fiction should read like nonfiction, and the best nonfiction should read like fiction. I'm sure Mr. Misra will, also have something to add on that, you know, because he's taken a very serious nonfiction subject and he's fictionalized it. So
That's a lovely thought, Aparna, and I hadn't ever heard that before, but I think I'm going to note this down in my idea book. And in fact, someone from the audience is actually leaving a message for you that if your book is not translated into Tamil, they would like to take it up. So, so that's lovely to hear that people are already loving the book. And Atulyaji, my next question to you, I think we just have time to maybe take one question each with the both of you. So Atulyaji, my next question to you is that Aparna already talked about how real people influenced her story. I'm very curious if Ravi and Thata are real live people who inspired the story for you. So are these real people who inspired the story? Do you find yourself a little bit in Ravi's character? So who was the inspiration behind these two characters, if you can talk about that?
Actually, at the time when this book was being written, we had two very important characters in Indian politics, Anna Hazare and Kejriwal. One coming from a bureaucratic activism background, and the other coming from a very straightforward Gandhian kind of background. Some of these characters were to some extent built on them to begin with. Then I read somewhere that there's a small group of Tamil people who are residing in Manipur. And how they reached there, I read about that, and then I went into their history. And some of the families I met who had actually later migrated from Manipur to Tamil Nadu, and one of them had also become a very big builder in the city of Chennai. And when I met that lady, she knew Hindi, she knew Manipuri, she knew Assamese, she knew so many other languages, and they were telling me about their journey to Manipur from Burma when the War of Independence was going on. So at that point of time, I thought that I will not go for these so realistic characters. I will create my own characters. And you might have also seen that there were some people in Northeast, mainly suburban areas of West Bengal, who were planting trees as a matter of faith and as a matter of passion. So all those inputs were there. And when I wanted to create a bureaucrat, I thought I will create it more. I took some stories of bureaucrats who had done well in my state, and there are some who can be considered, in bits and parts to be biographical, but there's no single person. I've taken things from here and there, put it in two characters, and I think they are now with so many dimensions that you cannot relate them to one single character of our time.
Great. Thank you, Atulyaji, for answering that. And maybe just, I realize we're out of time. Maybe just one last question, one-liner answer, maybe. What is your one single advice to aspiring authors today who are especially looking to write in this field of covering topics about environment, climate change, and green business? One-liner advice for aspiring authors. What would that be? Atulyaji, maybe if you might want to go first.
Fiction has to come from heart. So if you have a heart in writing about environment, if you are really passionate, then go ahead. Otherwise, it is like everybody is not born to write. There are some people who are born to speak. There are some people who are born to be good, great researchers. So don't push writing to yourself. If it comes from within, if a person is passionate, then he should certainly try his hand.
Okay. Thank you, Atulyaji. What about you, Aparna? Any last thoughts?
So I think stories are very central to our lives, right? So all of us like stories, no matter what it is. So to tell a story a certain way, depending on the language and depending on the medium, for example, I can't draw at all. So that's not my mode of storytelling or, any form of art. The only thing I can do is write. So I, tell stories through words. But whatever mode, suits you, I think pretty much echoing what Mr. Mishra also said, whatever mode suits you, go for that. And if you're going to use words, just read widely, because then it helps when you are writing yourself.
Great, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think before I hand over to Benedict, I would want to once again congratulate both of you. I think I have both the books here, right here with me, and they're going to go on my permanent bookshelf here. I'm going to recommend this to a lot of people. Once again, thank you so much for pouring your heart and soul into these stories. And we are honored and privileged that we were able to go through them and be a part of this conversation with you today. Over to you, Benedict.
Thank you, Roselin. You did a great job. We are on to a very interesting part of the award ceremony. Can I ask MC, can you put up the certificate and the first certificates? So we just designed this and we'll be printing and sending it to you. Hope it looks good.
Very nice.
Congratulations again, Atulya.
Yeah. So the next one. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Congrats. And we have a trophy. Can you show the trophy? So this is a work in progress. Okay. This is work in progress. And because of pandemic, the workers were not available. And this is being designed by a Bangalore-based firm that works with artisans. It's called Tamala. It's going to reach you in a week or 10 days, he's assuring me. So, and we'd also like to announce that we are, as part of the award, we will be giving 50,000 rupees as the cash prize. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really great.
Yeah, pleasure that you turned up and made this. Takeaway line from today is this, that best fiction should read like non-fiction and best non-fiction should read like fiction. So I'd remember that and use it wherever it's possible. Thank you, Mr. Mishra. Thank you, Aparna. You did a really good job. Yeah, we're done for the day. I'd like to invite Pooja to tell us about tomorrow's session. And Pooja, welcome. Thank you, Roselin. You did a great job.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Roselin. Thank you, everyone. So while you're here, I should tell you that you'll be seeing Mr. Atulya again tomorrow, because there's a very interesting climate fiction panel that we put together. This is a very trending topic, right? So we've got someone from China. We've got a children's author who also writes about climate fiction. We've got Mr. Atulya, and the person moderating it also, Rajat Chaudhary. He himself has been a climate activist and has been writing about climate fiction. So there's going to be a lot of talk about fiction and marrying it with, the topic of green, the topic of climate, and everything that affects us today. So how all, like Mr. Atulya, how all of them are making this subject so alive for us, correct? So that's what. And apart from that, we have some very interesting, we actually have a short film that has not been screened as yet, and is to launch actually on January. It's called While You're Sleeping. So please come check that out too. We also have, apart from that, this conversation on the topic of post-green. So I'm going to leave you all with curiosity and not tell you more, because I want you to come and actually tune in to find out what that is, what it really means, the term post-green. And the final conversation tomorrow is going to be about chronicling environment history. And we have two very eminent people for that as well. We have Mr. Shekhar Pathak, who has been, a historian. He is largely written in Hindi, and he's been an avid mountaineer. He calls himself the Himalayan traveler. So that, and Mr. Jairam Ramesh. So both of them bring to, life very different aspects of experiencing the environment and chronicling the environment. And although the focus will also be Mr. Shekhar Pathak's book, which is called The Chipko Movement, A People's History. And that is where all the difference lies, because it's going to center around the grassroots aspect of the movement and not only the stars. So yes, tune in for those stories. And obviously, I'm sure you're all curious about the winners for tomorrow for the general fiction and non-fiction. So tune in for that as well. Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful having all of you. And I hope to see a lot of you even tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. If Ajay is there, thank you, Ajay, for doing a great job today. So thank you so much. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors and partners. Yes, so our partners, WWF, India Climate Collaborative, Terry Asley, books on the Delhi Metro, Round Glass, Sustain, Funky Rainbow, Tamala, and Environics. Thank you, everybody. And of course, the festival is supported by the Habitats Trust. Thank you to them.